Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to episode 20 of Behind the Game, Kids in the Game's official podcast. I'm your host, Paul O'Connor. On this episode, we are joined by Risa Hamilton-Lightfoot. Risa is a former Up2Us Vista and is currently working as the Senior Manager of Learning and Development at Away. Risa also finished her master's degree at the University of Edinburgh in performance psychology, specifically with a lens on sports psychology and helping athletes achieve peak performance, which is awesome, and we're going to be getting into today. But Risa, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. Really excited, a little bit nervous.
No, there's nothing. You can't mess up. It's just a podcast, right? There's nothing to mess up. This is going to be fun. Excited to have you. But first and foremost, for people that don't know you, just want to give you an opportunity to talk about your background and experience, and all the way back to the Up2Us days, and then how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. So I played sports a lot as a kid. I went to private school. Played 3 sports there: soccer, basketball, softball. Tore my ACL, and like most kids, and ended up becoming sort of academically interested in sport. Studied performance psychology at the University of Edinburgh, and what was cool about that program is that it allowed you to sort of look at how the tenets of sports psychology could be applied to any element of a high performer's game, whether that is as an athlete, as someone in emergency services, or someone who is a corporate leader. And so the course ran for a year. I wrote my dissertation on how not to choke under pressure.
Man, we're going to need to send that out to everybody afterwards. Everyone could use that.
I don't know. And then before going to Edinburgh, I actually was the Summer Vista at Up2Us in their inaugural year. And I had the opportunity to work on the partnership that they launched with Nike to help equip urban coaches to do the urban coach training video initiative, and then also worked on making sure that all of the organizations under the Up2Us umbrella were CNCS compliant. And so making sure that they understood, like, by partnering with us, this is what your membership includes, and this is what we should be, this is what you should be doing in terms of offering kids the best services that we can have. Coming out of Edinburgh, it was sort of a bit of a do next. And so I went back into nonprofit. And so my career as it spans has been going sort of in and out of nonprofit, but always focusing on how to harness talent, how to develop talent in the organizational development capacity or in the learning and development capacity. And so I feel like everything that I did before then has kind of led me to this point, and have always had a passion for sports psych and sports-based development. So that's a brief intro and all the things I've done.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to dive into all that good stuff, and appreciate give everybody a brief background, like you said. But before we do that, I want to discuss the recent events surrounding the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. This obviously has been an extremely difficult past couple of weeks, and wanted to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts. I know you and I have talked multiple times before this podcast, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on everything that's been going on. And I'll leave it at that.
It's hard to sort of put a succinct feeling behind everything, because I think the Black existence in America and around the world is a tough one. It's really, really hard. And, there's this need to try and portray these people as completely innocent. And even if they weren't completely innocent, there needs to be a conversation around how do we not use lethal force against people when situations are high risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's disproportionately affecting Black people. And there is this conversation around how do we make this different in terms of law enforcement, but I think there needs to be a change on all fronts with how we are as a society. And we have to look at it through sports-based youth development, the way in which we integrate in corporate settings, bias that has been developed in our bodies and in who we are to help us survive. How do we adapt that in a way that makes it safe for all of us to exist and thrive and have the same access to the quality of life that we're all striving for? And it's just heartbreaking. So like Elijah McCain, he passed away, was murdered before Ahmaud Arbery, before George Floyd, before Breonna Taylor, and now his name is coming back into the fold. And it's just, you don't have to be an ideal victim. It keeps happening.
Yep.
And so that needs to be the conversation as well. How do we stop this from happening? Because the list has not stopped growing since George Floyd either.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think you said it in a really good way early on, that even if you were committing a crime, it cannot result in a death. I don't care what crime it is. It doesn't matter the crime. And for them, I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I will say for the majority, no, they weren't doing anything. And so if your response, and I'm sorry that we're kicking it off this way, but I feel like
I know,
it's good. It's good.
Can't not.
It's all about. For your response to this to be, well, if you just complied, this wouldn't happen, is so unbelievably tone deaf, ignorant, missing the point, whatever. I don't even think those three do it justice in terms of how I'm trying to portray that. But you said it the right way. Like, it doesn't matter if you committed a crime, because if I did those crimes, I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I would bet a lot of money that I would still be alive. How about that? I'll put it that way.
Right.
And it's quite obvious the reason why that is.
And there are even if we're saying that you made a rush decision when under pressure, the video of George Floyd dying, the officer had his hands in his pockets. There were other patrol vehicles on the corner. There were other police officers right there by his side. So there is a point at which you are no longer in imminent danger.
Yeah.
In Breonna Taylor's case, she was asleep. Her partner was there with her. Like, there are so many different instances where even if I was just doing the most and just being there, there has to be a reason why leading to mortal force. That should be the last option that you pursue.
Yep.
And it's just sad that we keep having to have this discussion, and there's been more than enough training. There's been more than enough education. At some point, you are aware enough, and this continues to be the choice. So why is that?
Yep. Without a doubt. I mean, obviously, we've everyone, the whole country, the whole world has their eyeballs on this. More than ever, I think you and I talked about it too, like in part because, we all are home right now and we all are focused on it. There's less distractions, sometimes it felt like when this did happen in years prior, it would get like swept under the rug because people were focused on different things, or you get caught up in your own life, and you just, it's, so I will say, I think I said this to you on our phone call last week too, if there's anything to be thankful for COVID for, it's that we are now having these conversations, all eyeballs are on it. There's no escaping it.
So I think what you're raising is an interesting point, and it's both good and heartbreaking. Is
Hmm.
that the systemic killing of Black people can be sort of reduced in a way to a trending topic,
Yeah.
and that right now we are at a stage where all of our energy and all of our attention is being focused on Black Lives Matter as a movement. But the reality is that what do we do as a next step once the attention has focused to something still in crisis?
Yep.
Even when the cameras aren't rolling, when we're not covering headlines, what is going to happen next to make sure that we are doing the hard work and
Yep.
the resonating work that needs to be done as the next step? Because we're going to keep hitting these fever pitches if
Yep.
we don't.
Yep. And it's a good segue into the next question about it, is because everyone's eyeballs are on it, and everyone is talking about it and having conversations. We've seen statements from every organization, every brand. I mean, tons of athletes. Some people you don't even expect to hear from, and you hear from. And I think I'll say that there's good and bad to that. You know, I thought that the idea around posting the black box had all the right intent, and I think for the most part was positive and made a difference because it's all you saw. Now, some people said, well, yeah, but we're not talking about, like, we're kind of taking a day off from talking about it and acting. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the black box. I still lean towards it was positive, and the intention was there, and it forced people to continue to at least try and show your standing in solidarity or your support for the movement. I don't know. Like, I mean, Twitter is not exactly the most helpful and healthy place. So,
No.
and you can read one opinion and then
Oh
right
man, the
underneath,
threads, the threads.
the threads are insane. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and how you thought it all went.
I think Blackout Tuesday, like you said, started with really positive intent, and I think organizations participating in it feels good as a consumer, as a potential customer, as a Black woman. You are looking to see, is the brand that I've been supporting also supporting my personhood? And that's just on a personal level. But then on a personal level, I'm a Black woman in a workplace,
Yeah.
and I've worked in corporate for a long time now. And the intent and the rhetoric that organizations put out is not necessarily the felt experience that its employees have. And
Yeah.
so if you are not an inclusive workplace, why would you be posting a Black square? And if you know that your house is not clean, then try and clean your own house. And maybe on Wednesday, the conversation should have been, yesterday we participated in Blackout Tuesday because we now know that we have a lot of work to do. And we've participated in this in the wrong way before that. And so that's how you take it from being a moment and something that could potentially be perceived as performative activism, and something that you're saying, I'm making the commitment to change.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to stick on the next step now, and you've mentioned it a couple of times. Like, now what? You know, everyone's eyeballs are on it. We're all talking about it. How do we move to change? And everyone at Kids in the Game, myself included, has a youth focused lens on it. You know, and I constantly think, you know, and for right or wrong, I'm not necessarily going to try and change a 45-year-old's opinion. I want to change, or maybe not even change, just emphasize what I mean, look, Gen Z is awesome. So I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can through sport to help shape their mindset as they enter the workforce and become adults. So wanted to get your thoughts on how you think the sport-based youth development world, the community, can help the next step, whatever that is.
So I think sports-based youth development is already doing a really amazing job. You're using sport as a vehicle to teach kids life skills to cope with the hardships that they're going to inevitably encounter. And it's always been about transferring the skills that you have in sport into life. I
Exactly.
think the I think the next step of how this can play out or how we can better leverage it is now that we're starting to see that the playing ground isn't necessarily always fair, how do you comport yourself? How do you find your way to continue to have a certain amount of mental toughness, manage your stress in a healthy way? It's keep moving and it's keep listening. And, there's a certain amount of patience that you have and really trying to figure out when do you act versus when do you take a minute and try to strategize and process, because I always think that we want to leap to action and then there's not a lot of thought around it. And so I think as practitioners within sports-based youth development, that's a conversation is how do we best serve the kids now that we see that things are really bubbling up differently. And then for the kids, it's, you know, what are you taking away from this now and what do you hope to give back once you're a little bit older? Because I know that there are kids who are young, 7 and 8, but there are kids who are 16, 17, getting ready to go off to college. They have a sound sense of self. Now that you've formed your self concept and you have a strong self concept, what would you wish for kids like you to know, and maybe try and capture that, because that will continue to help in sort of a pituitary in perpetuity.
Yep. Yep. No, I totally get it. And that makes total sense. What do you think coaches can specifically do? Because I get on my soapbox about how there isn't if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to be almost anything in life, there's schooling you have to go to, there's training, there are requirements, there are certifications. If you want to be a coach, you can just kind of be one. You just get a bag of balls and you start a program, and now you are a coach. I mean, I got coached. Now, this isn't a good example because my dad was a coach, but like I got coached by my dad all the time. And like, how many people do that? And I'm not saying don't do that. That's super fun. I wish I could go back to 8th grade right now. But how can, and there's, I think it's a two-part question. One, like, how can we improve just the coaching, just the skill development, just the drills? How can we improve that aspect of coaching? But to your point, we're coming out of a very traumatic experience for everybody, and kids are less able to, go through. I don't even know the right way to say it. Like they're just less capable than a 30-year-old adult to go through something that we just went through. So it's a two-part question. Like, who can help us with just the coach training? And then how can we get coaches more into the psychology part of it so that we're not just yelling and screaming when a kid makes a mistake?
Yeah. I think there's a movement now that's looking at sort of trauma training coaches so that they're becoming more aware of how to educate kids through physical education to come through trauma. I talked about this a little bit as well. It was, the research on trauma and mental toughness being a tool that does it cause strong performance in kids, or does it actually help you, or is it just one of it? And so, you will kind of like social science that correlation does not equal causation. And so just because trauma and high performance are related doesn't mean that you have to have the trauma to be a high performer. And so for coaches who are starting out and they're helping kids to navigate these periods of trauma, it's going to be listen. If you notice that your kids are acting a little bit differently than how you normally would have seen them, like if you know that they take a little bit of wrangling, a little bit of, herding cats because they're children, they're not going to focus. But if you notice that the focus has severely dropped, if you notice that they're acting out in different ways, be more mindful of how they're deviating from the norm. And sometimes it's on the pitch, you can drill down a little bit more, but then take some time off the pitch and really ask, like, I noticed that you had an unfocused day. Is everything okay? And leave it there.
Yep. Yeah.
And let them come to you.
Yeah. I think something that I've learned, and I have a feeling I always did it. I just didn't know maybe I was even doing it or necessarily like what the label was. But the in-between time, the time when they arrive to the gym, in between drills, post-practice, the walk to the subway, that I've learned is actually infinitely more important than what we did in practice. And I would disagree. When I was in college basketball, it was more important what we did in practice. But now in youth specifically, that time is so important. Like, to your point, listen, be a shoulder they can lean on, ask about their academics, ask what's happening in their family time. And then I think to take it even another step further, and something that we've done a good job at Kids in the Game and King Hoops, is hang out with them outside of basketball. Like, go see a movie as a team, go anything outside, because they get to know you more, they get to know their teammates better. I think that's super important, and you mentioned that. So again, it's like, how do we get all coaches to do that though?
I think it's taking a genuine interest in knowing that performance happens both on and off the field. So just like how when you're training for like weeks and months at a time, you actually improve during your rest times versus when you're training nonstop. So that's what you want to impart to coaches as well. Yes, everything that you're doing in practice is really important. Getting them together and having them focus during practice is everything. But to really harness and develop their talent, to really help them understand why it's important, you want to invest in them off the field too.
Yeah, without a doubt. I want to back up a little bit. I know you mentioned your ACL injury earlier, but what made you get into this field? Was it at the injury that kind of propelled you into it?
I played sport, honestly, pretty soon after I could walk. Like, I played soccer, I played basketball, I played softball, I ran track, I did cheerleading, I did dance, like, you name it, I've done it, I've tried it, and it was just so deeply tied to who I was. It was everything that I saw myself. And then junior year, up in Worcester, took a bad tackle, heard it snap.
Oh,
and
it's never good.
And I tried to walk off the field. The trainer was just so funny. He's like, I get paid by the hour. Take your time. Just like,
I get paid by the hour.
just so
lay down.
Like,
yeah,
nice, but like also really funny. Like, it was the best thing that I could have heard, like after the scariest sound of my life.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty good.
But it made me realize that my identity was just so tied to being an athlete. Before being a girl, before being Black, before being anything, I was like, oh yeah, I play soccer. I'm like, I'm an athlete. I play 3 sports. Like, it was a thing. And when I couldn't do that, I realized I knew I wanted to study psychology. I found one of my mom's books from college. Like, I was just a really curious kid, and I was like, ooh, psych, this is it for me. And so that was the point at which I knew I wanted to study both. And the University of Edinburgh, their program, I can't say enough wonderful things about it, just because the way that it was structured, it was in such a way that I could go on to do my PhD, or I could go out into the world and just become a practitioner. And there were HR practitioners in my course, and so that's how I ultimately ended up in like the people ops side of things.
Got it. You feel free to answer it from either your playing days or as you transition, but what are some of the most important lessons you learned through sport that you then took with you into adulthood?
I think I have a strong sense of ethics. And I'm always someone who's like, what's the fair way to do this? And so there's a sense of fairness that's very absolute in sports. And I know that it's, corrupt, people throw games, whatever, once you get to the professional level. But as a kid, and even at the collegiate level, like, I went to a D3 school, so it wasn't that serious. Um, it it's a very different environment where it's very clear that you put in the work, you work well together, the way in which you collaborate. Like, I'm a very collaborative person. I think that comes from, playing team sports.
Yeah.
All of those things are sort of the foundational pieces that lead me to be able to say, okay, there's another way to do this. There's a resourceful way to do this. Oh, if I put the planning in, then I'll have a better understanding of what the output could be. Okay, it didn't work this time, let's try again. And so my resilience, my sense of ethics, my love of collaborating, the fact that I will just try anything at least once, I think all comes from, being able to try those kinds of things in an athletic setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of my favorite things I've taken from sport is, just you see the results, right? Like some things sooner than later, but I'll never forget. I may have even told this on another one of our episodes, but like I maybe I was in 5th grade or 6th grade, but I couldn't make a left-handed layup, and it took maybe a whole summer, right? Like, because you just, when you're a kid, like you're a righty or a lefty, and then that's all you do.
Yeah.
And then like finally
Yeah.
you're like at a point where, wow, I'm not going to play a lot if I can't go left or go right. And so
Right.
I practiced a whole summer, and when I finally got it, that was like one of the most rewarding feelings in the world. And you can take that and apply it to anything. You want to learn the piano, same thing. You want to learn Spanish, same thing. Like, you want to excel in your job and get a promotion, same thing. I think what's so fun about sports is it's like tangible. It's like, well, I can make it now, right? Like, I can make the layup. So that was awesome. And then I think the other thing for me was just the importance of winning, in the sense, not that, just the importance of winning in the sense that, like, nobody cared who got the credit. Like, as long as we win, that's all that matters, right? Yeah. Like, and I learned that because I was, again, probably in middle school, when these things like really start to like settle in your brain. And I can't tell you how many times I had like 15 or 20 points, and I played really well, and the only question I got from people was, did you win? And like, whether we won or lost, I would always be like, yeah, but I made 3
But I had a great game.
Yeah. And they were like,
doesn't matter.
Could care less. Yeah, did you win? And then if you won, maybe you got to follow up about, oh, cool, well, how'd you play? But really, that was it. And I think, if I could have our athletes take one thing, it's like, just do that. Like, be humble, don't care about who gets the credit, and you'll move faster through life.
Yep.
Yeah, those are my 2 things. Wanted to ask you about, a couple more things, obviously, but about just mental health in our society as a whole. I think even in my lifetime, it's come a long way. Let alone our parents' generation. I mean, that was just like nothing. You just didn't talk about it. You were just labeled crazy if you had.
You're crazy. Good luck with that.
Yeah, it's just like, no matter what you had, you were crazy. Like, now we see athletes getting involved. LeBron James partners with Calm, meditation app. Like, how much has this helped the youth space or kids in general, in your opinion, be able to talk about these things?
I think it's helped tremendously. I think you want people to be able to bring their whole selves to whatever it is that they're doing. And trying to hide your suffering often leads to more suffering.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
There's a bunch of research around the impact that stress has in acute stress. So the minute, like, if you're having stress, like in a moment, sometimes it leads to higher performance because you're like sharp and focused, and you're like, yes, I can do this.
That's like fight or flight, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's the fight, flight, freeze. How do you respond in those like moments when things are really kicking off? But then there's the other side of sort of prolonged and chronic stress, and that's where you start to see all different kinds of really detrimental results and detrimental effects. So your focus is gone, you're anxious, you can't sleep, not being able to sleep does things to your weight management, your blood pressure, you just see it just stacks up
Yep.
all of the different things
Yep.
that can ruin you from not having a healthy outlet.
Yep.
And so I think sport is incredible in such a way because you're able to release a lot of the tension that you're feeling.
Yep.
And if you're getting the physical tension out and you have someone who's attending to you and helping to process and work through the hard parts of stress in a healthier way, then that sets you up way down the line. And so you may not be able to voice it to a therapist, but maybe you can talk to your coach. Maybe you can talk to your teammate, or maybe you can find the words to say it to whoever your guardian or caretaker might be.
Yep.
And
Yep.
those are the kinds of things that you hope are coming through in terms of understanding that we're full people. And just because we're or kid athletes or whatever, that your mental health doesn't come separate from that. And we've seen that with so many athletes who've left the game and didn't have the aftercare that they needed.
Yep. Yeah. I think to add on to that is just normalizing the feeling, whatever feeling you're having, stress,
100%.
anxiety, whatever it is, that, there was for most of my life, it just, you didn't talk about it, right? It was just like you especially being a male, it was like, no, like, we're big bad tough guys, like, we don't cry, we don't have, you know what I mean? Like, there's such like this stupid societal wall, I guess, we could call it. And I think
you shame people for it.
Yeah, like and most of the time, people just want to talk it out. You don't even necessarily need to have a solution. It's just
let them have a vent. Yeah, 100%.
That's it. Just a vent. And it's so helpful for not only athletes, youth athletes, but everybody. So yeah, I would agree with you. I want to ask one last question, and then a bonus question that I never tell our guests about, but sometimes they say it's the hardest one, but we'll see. But if you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about youth sports when we come out of COVID, what would you fix? Or you could do sports in general, but we could do youth sports.
I would keep it to youth sports, just because we've sort of focused on the trauma side of things. I think not giving kids a healthy outlet for their trauma would be sort of two parts of it, and sort of having coaches be more trauma informed outside of the SBOID space, because I think that with programs like Kids in the Game, there is an intent behind it. But other coaches, so a cousin of mine is a youth coach for the New York Red Bull. Another friend of mine is a youth basketball coach, and they didn't get any formalized training around how to help their kids when they're in distress.
Yeah.
But they're like, it's something that you learn by doing. And they're both pretty sound people, so I know that they're, doing more. But what about the folks who don't know that they're doing harm? So it's like, oh, just don't worry, just put your head back down, just focus on the game, don't focus on this. It's like, no, there has to be more to a conversation than that. So if that's something that we could fix, I would sort of hope that becomes more standardized.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, Risa, I really appreciate it. This was awesome, really fun conversation. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your background and experience. One bonus question before we get you out of here, because we're New York City based, we always ask everybody their favorite slice of pizza in New York City. I will give you, if you're not a pizza person, you can do favorite restaurant.
No, pizza's perfect.
Okay.
There's Ben's Pizza, which I think was on McDougal.
Ben's?
Yeah.
Ooh, we have not had a Ben's yet. Okay.
And then there's this pizza spot down in the financial district. and I don't remember what it's called, but I used to kill the Alfredo slice. And it's
Wow,
like
the
chicken
Alfredo. Wait,
Alfredo.
you got it. That's our office. Our office is in Fidei, so you got to remember this place, and we'll go get a slice.
Okay, definitely down.
So the Alfredo slice in Fidei. Do you remember the street? I gotta find this out.
Yeah. It's like off Broad.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm back in New York
Like in one
Saturday,
of the little
so
streets off Broad.
I got a mission now. The Alfredo slice in Fidei. I'll find it.
Yeah.
Before we actually get out of here too, just want to give you the opportunity. Where can everybody find you, follow you, connect with you, like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever you want to share?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest. Risa Hamilton-Lightfoot. Not too many people with my last name. So very easy to find there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Risa. I really appreciate it. And, we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
See you.